All right, so our program is Get Activated, How You Can Make a Difference. And this is an exciting program for us today. Many of us are inspired to make a difference. And you'll see in today's talk, politics tends to be local. So I got introduced to our first speaker, John Pickhaver, through our PV Dems president, Connie Sullivan. As she said, she was inspired by him in the 2022 election. And this is when John advocated to have the city of El Segundo illuminate the water tower in rainbow colors for Pride Month, and then he ran for El Segundo City Council. I contacted him just to feature him in an activism story at one of our meetings. And we kept talking and said, wow, he has much more to talk about than just a 5-minute spiel. And so I realized he's the founder of Sweat Equity Alliance, which is also called SEA Change. So it's C Change, a community activist network, and inspired change in his community and across the U.S. by advocating for diversity, equity, inclusion, and LGBTQ issues. So then after talking to John, we were thinking, well, who else? John introduced me to our second speaker, Tanya Taylor, also from El Segundo, who worked in his coalition. And she made the award-winning documentary Black and Mayberry. And I had watched Black and Mayberry back during the George Floyd murder incident. And I didn't realize, I didn't know about Tanya Taylor at that time. So she's the one who did that documentary. And she also founded the startup with the same name. So Tanya is focused on her project, Combat Racism Through the Arts, to make a difference in her community. And our third speaker, Paul DiCarmine, I met while sitting next to him in a packed room during the Palos Verdes Unified School District March 8th meeting's public comment period, which lasted 2 hours or over 2 hours. And it was about the discipline of 2 fifth grade teachers who read their students Kyle Lupkoff's book, Too Bright to See, which is about a coming-of-age transgender youth story. The teachers, the students, the parents, and the community's testimony during this public comment time were all in favor, or a majority in favor of the teachers, and this book was truly inspirational. So then I learned Paul DiCarmine and his wife founded Reasonable Parents to support our teachers and the diversity in our community. So that's how we have Paul. So after that meeting, our President Connie Sullivan, she read through all the public comment that was on the website. And that's how we found our next speaker, Kylie Murdoch. Because Kylie Murdoch, she's an alumni here from the PD schools. And I don't know, how many comments did you read through?
I know, 67 pages.
67. Yeah. And Kylie stood out. So Kylie Murdoch is a PD public school alumna who is still connected to her peninsula roots. She felt the need to write the school board to urge their support for LGBTQ students and oppose any policies that would ban books or education on issues like gender and race. Her activism took her to work for Third Way at Washington, D.C. think tank that champions center-left campaigns. So, and then our last speaker, to round off the panel, is someone that I've volunteered with in other areas, including the PV Dems. She is a former PV Dems president, Kay Ju, and she was elected to 2 terms on the PV Library District Board of Trustees, but she's here today to share how to make a difference in your community by being appointed to a board or commission at the local or state level. She is currently in her 2nd appointed term on the State Commission on Judicial Performance. So please welcome our panel, and they will be talking in the order that I introduced them. After they talk, they will also be asking each other questions, and then we will take questions from the audience. We'll start with
Well, thank you for having me here today. My name is John Pickhaver. It's great to be here in Palos Verdes. At the start of the pandemic, I got very into cycling, and anybody that cycles in the LA area knows that PV is the best destination to do that. So very much a fan of all the hills and cliffs here at PV Recycling. When I was thinking about the topic of how I got activated, I was like looking back through my life, trying to think if there was a moment that I could pinpoint. Thank you. And I was in 8th grade. The year was 2004, and Lance Armstrong Live Strong wristbands were sort of at their peak of popularity. And my principal at the time placed a ban on them, saying they violated the dress code. And I lost my dad to cancer, and I've been wearing this wristband the whole summer. I didn't see it as a fashion statement. I saw it as, an outward symbol of belief in the support against people fighting cancer and to raise money for cancer research. So I wrote a petition, did an essay, met with my principal, and she reversed the decision, and we were allowed to wear the wristbands. I mean, Lance Armstrong ruined the wristbands a little bit. At that time, we didn't know any better, so it was, still had cancer, so the wristbands were important. And I went on to high school and college where social justice was very much a part of the curriculum. But it wasn't again until 2020, when George Floyd was murdered, that I got really involved and took to the streets, protested, and marched. And what kind of shocked me was, here was a man, George Floyd, murdered in 4K quality for the world to see, and that still didn't resonate with people that change needed to happen. And that really struck me. I was surprised at the resistance that people had there, where things are fine, this is just a one-off incident, and people just weren't paying attention. And here in El Segundo, where I live, protests started in solidarity for George Floyd to see charges brought against the officers. And eventually that did happen. The protests gradually shifted in El Segundo to, okay, we want to see change in our community. And out of that formed this group called El Segundo for Black Lives that my friend Tanya, who's here today on the panel, helped start. And I joined that group, and we really wanted to just make a difference in town. We had a list of demands that were pretty reasonable. And again, I was shocked with the resistance, particularly online, from people who I believe are just a vocal minority. You could look at these protests that we were having in the streets, and we had the numbers, we had the momentum on our side, but our city council, for whatever reasons, felt beholden to this vocal minority. So we really had to push back in getting the things that we wanted to happen. For instance, we got the city to declare, to form a diversity, equity, inclusion committee as one of the city committees. And that was a great step. But it seemed like with every step forward, we were also maybe taking 2 steps backwards at the same time. So we got this committee, but then the city mandated that it be populated with people who also aren't in favor of DEI initiatives. They wanted to split perspectives on this committee so that they would have people advocating for DEI and not advocating for DEI. It's just all these backward steps, and I can point to many other examples where that happened. So it was a lot of rallying people together to make public comments at city meetings, and it was tough. And out of El Segundo for Black Lives formed another group, which Ann mentioned, the Sweat Equity Alliance for Sea Change, that I helped co-found. And we have a broader mission to make El Segundo a more welcoming place. So using this as a vehicle, we brought more initiatives to the city, particularly in the forms of proclamations. We got the city to declare Juneteenth proclamation, a Pride proclamation, Asian American Pacific Islander Month. These are all kind of symbolic things, but they'd never been done before. And we thought if we could put words to paper, we could then say, hey, the city said they were going to do this, or they believe in this. So now let's back that up. And one example I can point to that I'm most proud of was getting El Segundo, who is known for their water tower, which during the holidays, during Christmas, they'll light it up in red and green. Halloween, they light it up in orange. Depending on the LA sports teams do, they'll light it up in those colors as well. So I thought Pride Month would be the perfect opportunity to get the water tower lit in celebration of the LGBTQ community in El Segundo. And it was surprisingly hard to get done. I remember battling with the then city manager. It was like, water tower is not used for those purposes. In my head, I'm thinking, like, it's used for Halloween and when the Rams win the Super Bowl. Just this seems on that level. And I took it to the city council and spoke with the mayor. And a couple days later, got an email from the city manager who said, upon further review, we can light the water tower. So it was a big victory, and it was supposed to be, the agreement was to light it for just one day at the end of the month on the anniversary of the Stonewall uprising. And it was so well received by the community that they kept it lit the rest of the month, which I think was about 2 or 3 days at that point. And the following year, I kind of just sat on the sidelines to see what the city was going to do. And to their credit, they did the proclamation again, and they lit the water tower for the entire month, and it's now an annual tradition in El Segundo. And I believe we're very much a better city because of that. It's a small thing, but it meant a lot to people and just shows that El Segundo cares about everybody in the community. And as I continue to do this type of work, an election was coming up for city council. And I really wanted these values to have a seat at the table and not be, at the podium at a public comment section of city council meeting, asking for these things to be done that should be done on their own already. So I, pretty close to the filing deadline, decided that I was going to run and just pieced together a campaign on the fly. That's how I met Tanya Sullivan, was able to get the endorsement from the Los Angeles County Democratic Party. I also got the endorsement of the Los Angeles Conservation Society and the NOC, which is a progressive outlet in LA. But it wasn't enough to win the election, but it got people talking. It made the election about issues for once. And going door to door, speaking with people, they were, one, they loved the water tower, and they wanted to see more of this happening in El Segundo. And, ultimately the incumbent won, as well as the planning commissioner of 14 years. But there was also like a very MAGA happy candidate in the election who we beat by a 2-to-1 margin. So while the status quo won out, we didn't take a step backwards. And this is something I mentioned after election night. I know you don't get extra points for this, but as the vote count came in, with all the mail-in votes, each day my percentage of the vote went up and increased more than any other candidate. And to me, I look at that as a symbol of where El Segundo is headed. Now, like I said, I was late to the campaign, but I was getting those votes by the end of it. And it makes me hopeful that this city is trending in a more progressive direction and that we will see these values at the table. And for my role, I want to continue the work I'm doing with the Sweat Equity Alliance. I'm going to continue, and I have continued to attend city council meetings, speak during the public comments. I'm just going to advocate for these values to ensure that they do have a seat at the table, and we can make El Segundo and all the South Bay cities just a more welcoming, inviting place for everyone. That's all I have for right now.
And you've been running.
Look at this, I'm much shorter than Ron. Well, hi everybody, it is absolutely lovely to be here with you all today. The drive over here is so beautiful. I always enjoy coming over here. My family and I, one of our favorite spots is the Terranea. So as we drive over here, it's just so picturesque. It feels like vacation. I've only lived 20 minutes away. So it's wonderful to see that there are groups in our community that are active and that are trying to make change and that are consistently holding that front, because we often forget that the rights that we have today were fought for, and we shouldn't take for granted that they can also be rolled back. So we have to maintain our presence and maintain the struggle, only to hold what we have, but to continue to push forward and have more rights extended to people who are oppressed or have a lack of ability to fight for themselves as well. My name is Tanya, just started with that, and I'm the founder of Black in Mayberry. Black in Mayberry is a non-profit organization that combats racism through the arts. Through the arts is something that a lot of people question, because when we think about combating racism, we tend to think more of marching, petitioning, standing in the streets. However, it's very important to remember the role that art has played all the way throughout history, specifically pertaining to human rights. The arts has often been the forerunner of a demand for rights. It has often been the therapy for those who lack rights. And it is a very, very powerful tool for the continuation of the struggle for the rights that we fight for today, for activism. I like to remind people that although we don't think about it consciously, we do rely on the arts for so much. The blues, we think about that genre of music, that is all about struggle, African American struggle. That is the arts. When we think about the arts that came out of the Harlem Renaissance, a lot of it speaking to the struggle of African Americans at that time, again in the arts. So what we found when we made the documentary film Black in Mayberry was initially the desire was to have voices that were not usually heard, share experiences that were very unlikely ever heard. It was to have a conversation between our African American neighbors in El Segundo and have them say things to their neighbors who were non-Black that they wouldn't usually share. It's quite amazing how, as a culture, we have communities that, especially here, that are living in their own experiences. And it can be very easy to keep those experiences to yourself out of fear of judgment, or just out of not wanting to spotlight yourself in your community. Most of us just kind of want to, live a peaceful life, take our kids to school, go to work, have a barbecue on Saturday. And so it was really important, especially in 2020, when we began organizing protests in El Segundo. It broke my heart when in one of our protests that we organized, and this was with El Segundo for Black Lives, I was the events and community education coordinator, and I had asked a lady to speak at one of these protests. It had occurred to me that many people were attending the protests and they had the best of intentions and goodwill, and they came out with banners and they came out with strong support, but there was a huge gap in the knowledge. There were still very many questions as to why now? Why is it this incident? Why is it such a big incident? Why is it spread so much across the country? And I felt that was a lack in the understanding of what Black people experience in America. So it became very important that despite being there to support, that we also educate people who come to join the struggle. That's so important. We cannot underestimate how important education is. So at one of our protests, we had a lady who spoke, and she spoke about her son, who had just come of age for getting his driver's license, so going to have his driving test. And being a Black mother, she was both joyous and had extreme dread. A young Black boy having a driving license is a fear, because it means there's a possibility now that he steps into manhood, and he steps into a situation where he's more likely to have interactions with the police. Her fear was also the fact that not only was he a black boy, but he was also autistic, and she did not feel comfortable or confident that he would be treated in a way that would be understanding of him being autistic. Now, this story was extremely impacting, but unfortunately, our protest had gained some traction, and unfortunately, some of that traction was from counter-protesters. So while this mother was sharing her story and her fears and trying to connect with our community, we had some very ugly people screaming all kinds of obscenities, and it absolutely ruined that moment. And it was at that moment when I realized that I really wanted to create a platform where these stories and these experiences could be shared without interruption and without fear of the person who's sharing that story. So in a conversation with a good friend who was documenting the protest horrors, Mark and I, we had a conversation. He was saying to me that story, he said, I've never heard anything like that before. And my response was, well, of course you haven't. Why would we tell you that? And then he shared another story with me that a friend of his had told him, a friend who was black, that I shared an experience. I feel that because it was 2020, he was a little bit more open than what he would have been. And he said to me again, I've known this person for 20 years and he's never told me this. And again, my response was, why would he? And it clicked in my mind that there's so much that we experience as a community, as a black community specifically, that we don't share. There are so many experiences that we keep to ourselves, and I felt that if we could bridge the gap in that understanding and have more people understand what our experience was, people would understand more what systemic racism means. Because often when we think about racism, we think about it in the context of extremist expressions of racism, such as violence, police brutality, prison pipelines. But we forget that because racism is systemic, it affects people's daily lives in smaller ways and larger ways, but the effect is consistent and it affects people on a daily basis. So we wanted to have stories that were less known shared. And that documentary was premiered in 2021. It went on to win the Marina Del Rey Best Documentary Film Award. It was featured on the front cover of the LA Times. It was also featured in Yes Magazine, The Herald, Daily Breeze, and many other publications. We had many people reach out to us from all around the country, stating that they were living their own Black in Mayberry experience. We had many organizations such as yours reach out to us that wanted to share the documentary with their community, with their school, with their community leaders. So it had an impact not only in our community, but in many other communities in the US. That documentary was then the catalyst for creating Black in Mayberry as a non-profit, because we wanted to continue to be able to use the arts to be able to educate our community, to bridge gaps in knowledge, create better understanding, and also to continue to advocate for combating racism and to bring that education so people can really understand how it has an impact on the daily lives of African Americans and how it has such a deep historic and present impact. It's so easy to think that racism is something we look past because we no longer have slavery, chattel slavery, I should say specifically. And we try to neglect the fact that it's still present in different forms today. So that is what I do with Black in Mayberry. I create projects and programs that assist people through the arts to be able to have these conversations. Thankfully, the arts having a culture that already exists of being more agreeable in disagreement. It is not uncommon for 10 people to look at the same photo in the museum, the same painting, and have a definitely learn a lot from that, especially in our political sphere and in our social spheres as well. So it has been an amazing conduit for conversation and to have people come to the table and express themselves and share their opinions from all different backgrounds, ethnicities, and regions. One of our major projects right now that is taking my every moment that I have spare is Juneteenth. This year, El Segundo has approved for Black in Mayberry to host Juneteenth in the Recreation Park, which is the largest park in El Segundo. It has been a long battle, it was not easy, but we finally got those approvals, and the city has supported that this year we will host Juneteenth in El Segundo Recreation Park. So we are extremely happy about that because it's showing a step forward. As John mentioned, the city has made previous proclamations regarding diversity, equity, inclusion. They have also, with much of the work that John and I did through Asking for Black Lives, they finally went ahead and put together the DEI committee. So there has been some steps towards being more welcoming of the, let's say, the idea of diversity, equity, inclusion. What we want now is to transition from it being an idea to having actionable steps. And this year, they're actually supporting having a Juneteenth celebration in the recreation park is an actionable step. And we want to ensure that we can continue to take actionable steps to show that we are a city that's welcoming to all people of all ethnicities, of all backgrounds, of all religions. So I hope that you will join us on June 19th to celebrate Juneteenth. And if you have any questions at all, always reach out to Black in Mayberry. But we are definitely grateful to be here today and to share with you what it is that we do, and to also learn from other speakers that we have in the room. Thank you very much.
All right. So I've got some slides. I'll just wait for them to get queued up here. All right. Everyone on Zoom hear me? I can't see you anymore, so if you're giving a thumbs up, do that. And that's a few slides in. There we go. All right, thank you.
I'm not sure that's going to work. Give it a try.
Seems like no. So I guess I'll just ask you to change the slide. That's all right. I'll give you a signal.
I'm done.
Yeah. Okay. Well, back to slide. All right. Sorry about that one. Okay. So thanks for inviting me and the rest of the panel. I'm Paul DiCarmine, and my wife and I, as mentioned by Anne, founded a group called the Regional Parents of Palos Verdes. And despite the similarity of our banner featuring the beauty that is Palos Verdes, I have to tell you, to be clear, that I'm not a Democrat. Also, to be clear, I'm not a Republican. And our group, Regional Parents, is non-partisan. Okay. We were founded during the pandemic, kind of right in the dog days of COVID, and so our roots are kind of as an online group.
You can try it. Try it. Just
again. Go back. Okay. So, hate to admit it, but I'm kind of an online person. And one of my favorite online Twitter personalities is right there. I think he might be a politician too. But recently he posted an LA Times opinion piece that really sums up, one important reason why we formed the group. The article he posted is titled "How Comment Section Trolls took over the Republican Party. And so this piece is specifically about the Republican Party, but the more general point that I took away from it is that online spaces are polluted with not just trolls, but by know-nothings, people who loudly hold dangerous opinions, people who think they know better than the experts, and my personal favorite, speaking as a trained and practicing scientist, is people who do their own research. And the takeaway quote for me from the article is, it says, in comment sections, the nastiest commenters post more and more obnoxiously than the decent ones, until eventually the decent folk just decide not to hang out anymore. So, social media is awful. Next slide, please. Not true. The article goes on to say that the only remedy for this is comment moderation, where the grown-ups in charge try to thwart the trolls. And so this is true, but it's actually not the only remedy. So if you control who has access to your group and ensure that members are in fact reasonable before allowing them membership, you not only keep the trolls out, but moderation is fairly required. So next slide, please. So what are we about? Overall, our mission is to connect and empower reasonable people and to elevate reasonable voices. Why? Well, the simple reason for that is that without reasonable voices, bad things happen. So what do we care about? So no particular order, really. We care about rational discussion. We care about civil dialogue, science, facts, support for all children. And this maybe is the most important one, is evidence-based decision-making and policies. So I know we share this value with Dems because when I registered for today, I noticed something special in the calendar. So it says, to ensure COVID safety, we recommend that all in-person attendees wear an N95, KN95, or KN94 equivalent masks. Now, no one's wearing a mask today, and that's fine. I brought one. I tested today. I assume you all know each other, and it's not a concern. But the point is that this is a specific evidence-based recommendation for use of a device that stops inhalation and dispersal of exhaled aerosols. So why couldn't a message of this specificity and clarity have come from the school district during the entirety of the pandemic? Next slide, please. So how do we get started? August 2021, more than a year into the COVID pandemic, my wife and I were excited to have our kids go back to school. We're also a little nervous. The vaccine at this time was not approved for children. It wasn't approved in time for children for the start of the 2020 school year. Mask, ventilation, and testing were the only tools available for them, and I only had a Johnson & Johnson shot. So I was a little concerned myself. On August 8th, 2021, we tuned into the PVPUSD school board meeting that was online to find out what our district would be doing to keep our kids safe. This meeting was to begin. Anti-public health protesters demanded access to the meeting room. They refused to wear masks in contravention to the LA County Public Health Order. They graded the school resource officer, abused a staff member until the superintendent finally relented and let them have their instruction. The meeting never got started. All school board members, save one, left the meeting room. The district ended up airing 2 hours of anti-public health disinformation on the live stream, brought to you by local conspiracy theorists and TV. So, we were kind of in shock watching this. My wife and I did not want to live in a school district where conspiracy theorists control the narrative. So we started a group, and we needed a good name for our group. We asked ourselves, what is the opposite of what we saw last night? And we came up with retail parents. And we got to work. So one of the first things we did was initiate a letter writing campaign in response to the disastrous school board meeting, and then generate a petition signed by over 100 local parents, letting the district know that we support them enforcing the LA County health mandate, and we expect them to do it. And they did enforce it. So now we've got a growing group that can mobilize in response to extremist threats on the school system. Next slide, please. So then came the 2022 election. Radical right-wing activists correctly viewed school boards across the country as a weak spot for democracy, and they got to work in our district. The local conspiracy groups backed radical right-wing candidates, disinformation was rampant. The potentially centrist candidates couldn't really figure out what to do. They ended up getting torn apart and crushed. And we got to work backing the reasonable candidates.
Next slide, please. And the regional parents group was an invaluable tool in this election. Turned out to be a great channel for communication. We were able to rapidly get information directly to over 200 parents. School board elections are often decided by a few hundred votes, as I'm sure you know well, and we need to make sure that our network of parents understood this. So we asked everyone to vote in our group. We also asked them to each get 4 other votes, which would be a total of about 1,000 votes in the election. And we thought with that, we could win. We did a lot of work to get the message out about the importance of the election and to get the vote out as well. Some people did voter registration tables, some held events for low information voters, even turned groups of very unlikely voters, what we might call self-disenfranchised people, into voters. We held a forum with the regional candidates in this room actually. Generated postcards we had printed, made and shared by email and text. People printed their own copies. We generated and shared sample text that our members share by email and text messages. People print their own copies. The goal was to make it as easy as possible for our members to secure votes. This was very little money, well under the FPPC reporting requirements, all grassroots group action. We had such an impact that we generated at least 2 FPPC complaints, both were out. That's kind of my favorite part of it. And with our network, we're also able to observe report violations by other candidates Rotary groups as well and reduce their reach. Next slide, please. So this is the result. As you know, we won mostly. There were 4 seats up for election. In the regular election, we won 2 of the 3 seats. Unfortunately, there wasn't really a third reasonable candidate we could all unify behind. And the special election, our candidate won that seat. 1 seat was not up for election, the woman holds that seat. In my opinion, is very reasonable. So despite all the noise from the handful of people you might hear, we're actually in the shape here. So what else have we done? Next slide, please. So fast forward a few months, and there was the March 8th school board meeting. As I mentioned, this is about a teacher reading a book, 2 teachers. And this is where I was introduced to NI. Just like you, the PVPUSD, we had people supporting the students, supporting the teachers, and several speakers. And this meeting was actually not just about a book. There was a critical agenda item up for debate, and it was whether to create a parents committee to review and decide school curriculum. So we spoke out against that too, and it was ultimately shelved. Next slide, please. So what's next? One thing is ensuring that our teachers in PV are supported and fairly compensated. So one of our members made the banner behind me. A bunch of us will be at Mulligan Cove on Wednesday to March to the board meeting at the district office with our teachers who are bargaining for a fair deal. And this is not just important for teachers, right? It's important to parents that we can recruit and retain the best teachers here in PVPUSD. What else? Next slide. And you may have heard that the superintendent of PVPUSD has left us for PYLUSD. And when he's down there dealing with book bans, CRT, and parents' rights, we're here working to ensure that a reasonable superintendent is hired. And we see this as a good opportunity for the district. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. I don't think you all can see me. Is that correct?
No.
Oh, okay. Now you can. Now my face is huge. Hi there. My name's Kylie Murdoch. I was born and raised in Palos Verdes Estates. I went to Lanata Bay Elementary and then PVIS and PV High. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I guess I first got interested in politics in my US history class junior year of high school. I'm not sure how familiar people are with the teachers there, but Miss Christina Varela was my history teacher, and she made sure to put a lot of emphasis in her teaching plan about women's rights and civil rights movements. which I think was fairly bold considering, I don't know, at least when I was in high school in PV, the political climate there was, at least my understanding was people were really conservative. There were a lot of Republicans. And you didn't really talk about politics in high school, but I remembered starting a club, and people would come up and be like, "Oh, what's this club about?" And we'd say feminism, and they'd give us like the biggest eye roll, uh, which I don't understand. Uh, but yeah, and so I went to DC with my mom for a weekend, and I don't know what it was, but that really inspired me to get more involved in policy and politics. I started a sexual assault awareness campaign at PV High, which also got a good amount of pushback, which is interesting. And yeah, my government teacher, senior year of high school, at the very end, went around and was telling us, was going around complimenting the class since it was our last day in school. And she got to me and she said, Kylie, I think you're going to be the next Gloria Steinem. And I was like, okay, that's a what's the word, over exaggeration, but she would see how much I was into women's rights and just politics and all of that, and the guys in my history class, no, sorry, my government class, actually thought that was funny. They started snickering when she said that. So I'm not sure where they are now, but I'm I work in politics. I'm loving it. After high school, I graduated in 2016. I went to UC Berkeley, where I was then radicalized. No, that's a joke. I mean, I did obviously, it was a much bigger community. I learned so much more than I did growing up in PV. I participated in our Dems student chapter in our student government. I volunteered for Hillary's campaign in 2016 and Elizabeth Warren's primary campaign in 2020. Being in Berkeley, you're actually just a couple hours from Reno, Nevada, which is a pretty big swing area in Nevada. So did some canvassing around there, which in rural Reno isn't actually that fun because the houses aren't super close together. And so it's a lot of walking. And Nevada is also hot. So I only did that a few times, but it was a good experience. One summer, I came out to DC and I interned for Congresswoman Barbara Lee, who's now running for US Senate. But she was my congresswoman when I was in school. And yeah, that summer really helped like solidify my desire to move back to DC and to work in politics. So fast forward, I graduated in 2020, which was not a great year. I graduated into a pandemic and a recession. I moved out to DC. I was unemployed for a couple months, but finally found a job at Third Way, which is a center-left think tank. We do like to think of ourselves as more of an advocacy group than just a think tank. So I started off as just like an executive assistant. But I just kept asking for more and more work. And I've been there for 2.5 years now. I'm a policy advisor. I handle our social policy issues. So the non-controversial issues like immigration and abortion and crime and all of that. LGBTQ issues. Yeah, so I mean, Republicans taking over Congress has been taking over the House, sorry, has been very interesting, working on such controversial issues. There have been a lot of radical bills introduced. A lot of what you're seeing in like red states like Florida is being brought on the national level to Congress. Things like banning trans girls from playing sports. The Florida Don't Say Gay law was introduced as a national bill here, and it did pass, but with no Democrat support, which my organization, that was our main goal. Our main goal was to help keep moderate Democrats from voting for these bad bills, for bills that would be harmful, and to help them talk about it in a way that they weren't scared they would lose re-election in their swing districts. So yeah, that's what I do. I guess how I got connected to this, Anne had mentioned, my US history teacher, who I mentioned, Christina Varela, she reached out to me over Instagram. We've kept in touch. And she told me about what was going on at our, school district, and asked me if I could submit a public comment. And I did, because I've seen, the harm these kinds of movements, or whatever you want to call them, can have. I've seen it happen in Florida, in other red states, and then having it brought to the national level. And as a former PD student and as a gay woman, I knew I had to say something about it. So that is why I'm here. Thank you so much for having me. Excited to talk some more.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
I'm Kay Cooperman, Jew. And first thing I'd like to say is that I've been a member of this club for almost 20 years, and all of my activism was born in this club. The other speakers today talked a lot about things that they started. That is not what I'm talking today. I'm talking about joining things that already exist, and to talk about something that maybe not everyone has thought about as a way to get involved, and that to get appointed to a state commission. And there are dozens of these commissions. It's unbelievable how many there are. And the way you can get an idea of what's out there is to go to the governor's website or the Speaker of the Assembly's website and click on appointments at the top of those home pages, and you'll just see lists of them. And that's exactly what I did about 6 years ago. I went to the Assembly Speaker's website because I decided I wanted to get on the Commission on Judicial Performance. I've had an interest in law and the courts since my college days. I just thought the best route for me to follow was to seek out an appointment from the Speaker of the Assembly. So I filled out the paperwork, and I got some wonderful reference letters from our Assembly member, Al Muratsuchi, and our State Senator, Ben Allen. And I also had kind of a unique background and skill set that I thought would fit into the work of this commission. And after a few years of waiting, after going through an interview process, I actually got appointed to this commission. And I have served on it since 2019. So a little bit about the Commission on Judicial Performance. It was established by a legislative constitutional amendment approved by the voters in 1960. It's the first commission of its kind in the nation, and now all 50 states have similar agencies responsible for investigating and disciplining state judges found to have engaged in misconduct. The Commission's mandate is to protect the public, enforce rigorous standards of judicial conduct, and maintain public confidence in the integrity and independence of the judicial system. The Commission's authority is limited to investigating allegations of judicial misconduct and, if warranted, imposing discipline. Judicial misconduct usually involves conduct that violates the California Code of Judicial Ethics. So an example of misconduct would be a judge exhibiting poor demeanor from the bench, like being impatient or sarcastic or demeaning to litigants and attorneys. or making racist or sexist comments to them or to colleagues or courthouse staff, also showing bias or abusing authority, or using his or her judicial office for self-promotion or to promote an outside interest, or engaging in activity outside of court that is undignified, for example, public drunkenness. So the discipline that we the commission issues, is in the form of everything from a private advisory letter sent to the judge all the way to removing a judge from office. The commission determines the level of discipline based on the seriousness of the misconduct. Most of our business is confidential. The exception is cases involving a high level of misconduct for which a judge will receive a public admonishment, and removals from the bench also are reported publicly. Our job isn't to punish judges. Our job is to ensure that the public continues to have confidence in the integrity and independence of our judiciary system. And for that to happen, judges must be held to account for unethical behavior or other conduct on or off the bench that is prejudicial to the administration of justice or otherwise brings the judiciary into disrepute. So the commission has 11 members. It's made up of 2 Superior Court judges, 1 appellate court judge, 2 attorneys, and 6 lay members. I'm one of the lay members, which we call public members. Commissioners are appointed by the state Supreme Court, the governor, the Speaker of the Assembly, and the state Senate Rules Committee. Assembly Speaker Anthony Rendon appointed me to the commission, and last month reappointed me to a second 4-year term, and I feel extremely honored to serve on this commission. And I think I'll stop there, and would be happy to answer questions. And by the way, sorry that I'm on Zoom today. I just wasn't feeling that great. I would have preferred to be in person.
Okay, so we're gonna transition to where I like the board people who have heard everybody. If you have questions of other people, I'm saying our panel, other board, came from the board. Our panel people, if you have any questions of each other, I wanted to start with just a couple, and then maybe you guys have, and then we'll take it from the audience and also from Zoom. But we'll go backwards here in terms of what Kay was saying. So Kay, what would have happened to Clarence Thomas on your commission?
Well, just speaking as an individual and not for the commission, there's no question in my mind there are ethical problems with him. And if he were a state judge, I think someone would have filed a complaint and we would be investigating.
And then, John, I'm going to push you a little bit. There's 3 openings on the city council, I think, in this next election. So you have to make a decision pretty soon on it, I'm thinking.
Will I be heard from over here?
No, I'm gonna switch.
Yeah, so I figured I would get this question, and I had a very cute answer prepared because I was training for the San Diego Marathon two weeks from now. I was going to say that's the only race I'm focused on right now, but I got injured, so I'm no longer doing that race. So I'll have to expand on it a little bit. Yeah, so there's 3 seats up, like you said, and the next election is during the general election, 2024. And for me, the most important thing is to see that the values that I was advocating for and pushing for have a seat at the table. So if I feel that I'm, the best person to do that, I will run again. And right now, I'm just kind of piecing things together. But whether I run or not is something I will be deciding well before I did last time, because I think it helps a lot to have things in motion prior to the deadline.
So will any of these seats be open seats? I mean, are there 3 incumbents that you men
Uh,
expect will run?
yeah, so the current mayor, Mayor Drew Boyles, has publicly said that he will not be running again. I think he's been on the council since 2016, so it'll have been 8 years at that point. And then there's two other incumbents who haven't expressed their intentions, not just yet. The mayor does rotate, but unlike other South-based cities, it's voted on by the council members themselves. So every 2 years, the position rotates, but rotating in the sense that the fellow council members elect the mayor. But the mayor runs as a council member.
Okay, and this was also on chat with this. So it was very nice you gave us an activism challenge here. Excuse me. So people want a little bit more information on your May 24th rally?
Sure. So just to be clear, this is not my rally. It's not a reasonable parents rally. We're very grassroots. This is something that a member shared in our group. Another member put it into a nice infographic. My understanding is that the Faculty Association of the Palos Verdes Peninsula are rallying at Malaga Cove on Wednesday at 4 p.m. This is the school board meeting. The open says starts at 5:30. Malaga Cove is very close, so I believe it's going to be a rally, and then supporters and teachers will march down to the school board meeting at 5:30, and there will be a good amount of public comment at the meeting too. So if you do want to join, be at Malaga Cove sometime before 5, and then you can march down with teachers and supporters.
Thank you. And then my last question is for you, Tanya. So I know you have this arts group that you're doing, and does it go outside of El Segundo, or is it just in El Segundo? And just also as a follow-up, what is your relationship with the El Segundo Museum of
Thank you. So the organization, though we founded in El Segundo, we do extend our activities to Los Angeles County. That being because there are many groups who we collaborate with that are specifically in El Segundo, and also because racism, other than just El Segundo, we have our problems. We do. We're not the only ones. In relation to the El Segundo Museum of Art, ESMO has always been a friend of Mayberry. They permitted us to use their space to film the documentary, and they continue to support our organization. We had planned to collaborate on Juneteenth also, but unfortunately one of their members is ill, so we're not sure what will happen there, but for sure, ESMO is a museum that does support diversity, equity, and inclusion. And if you go to their website, you will see they have absolutely amazing programs that they run in the art that showcase artists from all around the country, from all different backgrounds, ethnicities, ages. They do an amazing job, an absolutely amazing job in our community. I would say, quite earnestly, that I think that ESMO is perhaps, in terms of organizations in El Segundo, is perhaps the forerunner as an organization for pushing out the need for our community to be more inclusive.
Okay, so now we're going to take questions from you guys. So who wants to go first?
Okay.
Okay, great.
Paul, when we started originally what was El Segundo for Black Lives in 2020, one of the issues that we had was trolls. Oh my goodness, this topic really did steal a lot of our time. And I was wondering, when your group started and established on Facebook, did you have a problem with that also?
Thanks. So actually, we do have this thing in common, a great thing that can't be interrupted by, I call them unreasonable people. You had a different term for them. And And they do, they like to interrupt, beautiful things, they like to interrupt progress. And, we didn't have a problem with that because of the way we structured our group. So, without going into too much detail, there was a large Facebook parents group at the time where people were trying to discuss issues at the time. It was COVID. And it was very easy to find the people who had thoughtful comments, who cared to have constructive conversation, and who the people were who wanted to tear that down. The conversation was so scattered, the moderators would just delete posts eventually if they got too trolly. And so we went in there and we started picking off the people that we knew were reasonable, and we invited them to us. And it's a closed private group, and we don't let people in. We're going to do that. And the group is big enough now that there's kind of an ethos and an acceptance of how it works. And even if someone did sneak in, they get shut down pretty quick. I've never deleted a comment or post. Just kind of self-moderates at this point. So I don't know if that's helpful to you in your situation, but having a gate basically is what's worked for us.
Was it Kay?
Kay,
Kay, you want to go ahead?
Yeah. I am just so impressed by people who actually start movements and organizations. And those of you on the panel who did that, I'm just wondering, did you ever experience moments of discouragement? And if so, how did you keep motivated?
Periodically, yes, everyone faces those feelings. Fortunately, our group is pretty big and supportive, and it's a place to go to find like-minded people who, you can rely on and who will go to a school board meeting and speak and write public comments and support each other. And so those moments for us are fortunately pretty fleeting. We've got a strong group of committed people who are there for each other.
So the groups that I joined and helped organize and found were founded pretty much at the height of the pandemic and social justice protests. And it was, I don't know if this is the right word, but it was easy to mobilize people then. When people were at home, people were engaged. So it was very easy to get it off the ground and into something. But I think the challenge has been keeping it going, because as things open up, kids are back in school, sports are back, people are back into the routines, it becomes more of a challenge to maintain. And we started as, the groups also kind of for Black Lives and Sweat Equity Alliance as reactionary to what was going on. And that really served us well at that time because there was a lot going on. I think what we've been trying to do now is we're still reacting to, ridiculous things when they happen, but we're trying to have our own programming, our own goals and initiatives, and just the challenge is making sure, finding ways to keep people engaged. And that's something we've been working on lately, trying to hold more events, in addition to, our calls to action. When City Council does something, we want people to respond. We want to make sure we're giving as much to the people in our organization as we are asking of them, and just looking for ways to do that, I think, is the best way to, be sustainable and an effective organization.
And my organization, I think possibly one of the most discouraging things was, thank you, 5 days prior to premiering Black in Mayberry, the documentary movie, we received a bomb threat, which went along the lines of, if Esmora dares to show this documentary, we will blow the place up. And that was extremely difficult because you have to consider the safety of others, despite the fact that we had, this great desire to have these voices heard and these messages shared. It was such a huge dilemma of what to do, what was the right thing to do, having the police involved, the FBI involved, having reporters calling. It was very difficult, alongside being 8.5 months pregnant. So it was very difficult decision, but I think that what was very encouraging was that one of the members in our community, without any prompt or any request from myself, Edgar Smith started a rally which he asked members of the public to join him and do a march down Main Street all the way to the museum to show support. And that, when you connect with your community, you will often see that they will come to your aid in times where you think are the most difficult, when you are beyond your capacity of making a decision or knowing which way to turn. And that definitely did inspire and give me courage again to ensure that our mission was not thwarted by these threats or by what I call the ugly people. And I think every organization has those times where an outside influence makes it extremely difficult for you to know whether you should continue pushing forward with your mission. And the answer is always yes, do push forward with your mission. It's just a matter of how.
Yes. Yeah. So Kylie, you haven't started a group, but you probably work with a lot of groups that have started, so maybe you have a comment on this. Make sure you unmute.
Sure. I mean, so my organization started back in the 2000s around organizing around gun violence. I mean, I'm junior staff, so I don't know a ton about their struggles, but obviously when it comes to forming an organization like this, we do now have 70 staff. You need money, you need donors, you need grants, you need to make a name for yourself. So I think one of the first things we did was have an honorary board of members of Congress. That kind of gives you some legitimacy. Something that we really focus on is, I'm not sure how familiar people are with think tanks, but a lot of think tanks will they'll write reports, they'll write papers, they'll put them out into the world. And that's kind of where it stops. So we like to focus a lot on impact. And so we work with a lot of congressional offices. I've given briefings to congressional staffers before. My boss was actually asked to be a witness for Democrats at a congressional hearing. So I staffed him at that. That was fun. It was based on a report we had written about murder rates in the US, kind of pushing back on the Democrats are soft on crime narrative that gets pushed by Republicans. I think I've definitely veered off from what the question is, but
That's fine. You have a question of your own.
Oh, not yet. No, I'm still listening. Yeah.
I do have another question for you. Where were you January 6th, 2021?
I at the time was living in Alexandria, Virginia. I was living by myself. And at that time I didn't have a couch. All I had was a TV. So I think I was actually sitting on the floor of my living room, working, watching the news. And I just remember messaging with my bosses, my team members, and just being like, this is absolutely surreal. Like, are people actually breaking into the Capitol right now? Luckily, I was not in DC proper. So I didn't personally feel, unsafe, but it's definitely really unnerving. I don't think people realize like how serious it truly was. People were coming to murder the Vice President of the United States, and the Speaker of the House. And yeah, I mean, I'm sure you all know, our democracy is really under attack. And yeah, it's just really important that we continue the work that we're all doing to make sure that people have a voice and that our elected leaders are held responsible. But yeah, January 6th was crazy. Yeah.
Glad you see. Okay, so how about any more questions from you guys to each other?
For Paul as well, similar to Tanya's question, I'm very jealous of this group. I think every city would benefit from having one. But I was curious if your group or the individuals of your group still engage in the group that you came from to combat misinformation. I know that can take up a lot of time. You're doing a lot of effective work outside of that, like with powers that be, getting people elected. But my experience with the trolls, or the ugly people, as Tanya would say, is that they'll say something so extreme, and people that aren't commenting or participating will read that and be like, well, it's probably not that bad, but they're probably onto something, and then they'll have that idea in their head. This is supposed to be a question, I'm just going on, but how do you address that and still try to combat the misinformation that's going on in the other groups?
So I totally understand what you're asking, and we do go out there into the online world and combat disinformation. You have to kind of balance how you do that. It can occupy a lot of time, and that's actually a technique that trolls will use, is to occupy the time of people who could be spending it in other ways. I did actually have a little bit in my talk about this, I cut it out for time, but I do think it can be valuable to combat disinformation in popular online forums. When you see people engaging, that often means there are more people watching as well and not engaging. Like you said, they might be on the fence. They might, think someone's onto something if they don't see the counterpoints, right? And you can combat this stuff with apps. It takes time. It's really unfortunate, feature of entropy, basically, that it's easier to spread disinformation than it is to combat it. But you can do it, and with enough good people willing to work on it, you can do it. And yeah, there's an unfortunate thing happening in PV right now, that's playing part of it. We're speaking out against it. We're fighting it online. I think people will be at the school board meeting on Wednesday, speaking about it as well as another issue.
And what is that issue?
Oh gosh, I don't know that I feel comfortable getting into it. It's pretty fresh. It's about an individual. I actually don't want to put a spotlight on it.
All right. So we'll now. So let's take questions now from the audience, and I'll start from in the room, and then we'll go on Zoom. Okay. And you have to come up though. Speak into the mic. Or I can go to you. Is that my scene?
Yes. What do you think the impact of artificial intelligence will have on the truth?
So, did everybody hear that? The impact of artificial intelligence on the truth?
That's a fantastic question, because that really does scare me. I think that when you rely on a system that takes information that it finds pulled in a certain location, it's not that the information that it's taking is correct. And I think what's going to happen, and this is not just an issue of artificial intelligence, this is an issue of the press in general as well. What often happens is what is written becomes what is true. And when you have your source of information unchecked, you can lead to a lot of misinformation. I think that currently, even presently, what AI is drawing from has not been sufficiently reviewed monitored, corrected where necessary. I mean, even Wikipedia can get a bit crazy. I've seen some pages on there. Did someone just totally make this up? So I think that unfortunately a lot of people immediately believe what they read if it's on the internet, and to trust that AI is giving you truth would be a very serious mistake to make. And of course, it's a computer, and computers require programming. People have to program them. People have to tell them what to draw from, where to draw from. So it's not untouched from human bias.
I would agree with everything Tanya said, and the other thing is I think people will start to weaponize AI and create their own content, with emulating people's voices and video now. I think that's going to be a big danger. And one thing that gives me a little bit of hope is like when the internet came out, there were cyber attacks and malware attacks, and then all these companies propped up that combat those. I hope we see a version of that in AI, but at the same time, I think we need to, as readers and viewers of news, just not take everything that we see to be true. If it seems off, or would he really say that, say who's the president or something, for me, I would try to seek out that information elsewhere and see if it's being covered by another outlet. I just wouldn't let one passing extreme thing be the deciding factor for me. And I just think we need to be more alert as at the media that comes our way, and I hope that companies arise that can combat that as well.
I'll just add something briefly. So in addition to what they said, I think one concern is that people may stop being able to believe anything they see online, and it may, cause us to doubt truth that we see online, and that's pretty concerning. I think, fortunately, there's a real world that we can live in, and we can get truth from human interaction. But what it's going to do to truth in the online world is pretty concerning. And one additional thing, we're engaging in a superintendent search for the PVPUSD, and a lot of people are going to say that facilities and DI and things like that are the most important things they want a superintendent to be championing, and those are all important things. And I think one thing that's important for me as well as a superintendent is familiar with technology, because this can come into our schools, and we need a superintendent who is ready to deal with it.
Okay, Kay or Kylie, would you like to comment?
I'll just quickly, it's something I hadn't thought about. But the first thing that occurs to me about, in the context of the commission, I think about artificial intelligence all the time, and personally have all kinds of fears and concerns. But as far as the commission, I guess the first thing that occurred to me is we take our complaints. The commission works almost totally off of complaints that are submitted to us about judges. And just in the last year or so, we have accepted complaints online. So I'm thinking we could face like an avalanche of fake complaints. And I guess the staff is going to have to figure out how to figure out which are legitimate and which aren't. So that's pretty scary. And one other thing I'm noticing on the chat, there was a question about, it says, does your role only affect California? I don't know if that has to do with me, but I'm guessing it does. And yes, this commission oversees just state judges. So Superior Court, Appellate Court, and the California Supreme Court justices.
Oh, thanks for catching that. And Kylie, did you want to write in?
Sure, I could just add something really quick. I think in the 2020 election, we saw a lot of misinformation and fake news, and that definitely contributed to polarization, to people voting for Donald Trump. I think with AI, that could definitely make the 2024 election more dangerous. I know the Republicans released a video against Joe Biden a couple weeks ago, and it was completely AI generated. So it's kind of scary to think what Republicans or other people can do just with AI, and you can just spread more lies and rile up the base, and that can also lead to extreme violence, as we've seen. So yeah,
Okay.
not great.
Okay, I was going to take a question.
I don't know if you guys saw this, but our congressman had Chat GPT, right? Legislation to regulate AI. And he said it came out pretty good. He said he'd give it a B.
I saw that. Okay, we have a question online. Louis, you want to, are you there?
Yes. Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
As an activist, you are often dealing with people you don't disagree with. In fact, that's probably why you are an activist. You want to change people's minds. I have never successfully changed the mind of any MAGA person. I'm wondering if you have, and what tactics, what approaches you've taken in doing that. I kind of feel that they have gone through the looking glass and you can't reach them. What are your thoughts?
Who'd like to go first?
I can go first, if that's okay.
Yes.
So I would say that when it comes to persuasion, the best area for us as Democrats to focus on is probably swing voters, people who aren't necessarily in the MAGA base, because like you said, they are so ingrained in the MAGA base that, they have Fox News just confirming their biases, all of that. But I think in general, the best way to get through to people is to talk to them through their values. So, for example, framing issues in a way that speaks to somebody's religious values or somebody's, patriotic values. Right now, the Biden campaign is focusing a lot on individual freedom, which is like a core, value of many Americans is individual freedom, and focusing on how Republicans are attacking those freedoms. So yeah, I think it's a lot about framing and just speaking to where people are and what they believe. But again, you aren't always going to be able to convince everyone or
any
talk people over.
Yeah, thank you.
Mhm.
I'm not saying that I've convinced anybody, but I do feel that one of the important things to do is to not engage with them with people, let's say MAGA people when they're in their pack. It's absolutely on point. Yeah. It's like going up against hyenas. It's never going to happen. I say that because quite often what you'll find is that in the pack there's a leader. That's the one who's die hard, going to die with these beliefs. But quite often in that pack, there are people that they drag along with them that may not necessarily hold as strongly the views that that person has, but they're not there because of their views, they're there because of their relationship with that particular person. I say that because I've had two experiences in the last year where I have been walking through the park with my husband and my children, and this was most recently was just last year in 2022. And a gentleman stops us and he says, "Oh my goodness, your children are so beautiful. Oh, they just love what a wonderful family." And he starts talking to us, and I'm looking at him thinking, I recognize you. I know I recognize you. And I look at the dog and I say, I recognize you too. I have definitely seen these people before. And then it clicks. I had seen this man when we were doing our demands protest in in our Segundo in the, what's it called, the Civic Center. And he was one of the ugly people screaming obscenities and saying just horrendous things. And I remembered him because I remember thinking, and look at this big, brave man standing there screaming obscenities at us with his emotional support dog. And I giggled to myself because I often make these funny jokes to keep myself during these kind of situations. So after he left and you were left smiling, I said to my husband, he was one of the people that was at the protest screaming things. He's like, no, couldn't have been. He was such a lovely man. My husband, he does photography, so he was taking photos on that day. We went home and took a look at the computer, and it was that exact person. That happened twice last year. I have begun to recognize that quite often when you feel that you are having an argument with someone about their values, it's not necessarily their values that you're arguing against, but you're arguing with somebody who feels a sense of obligation to the person they came with. So I think that when you identify that there's a person within that group who possibly is there to support someone because they've been told to just come along, and John and I have seen this, those who we call the loud minority will just round up people, from everywhere and anywhere just to kind of have a bigger impact. But if you can identify within those groups somebody who's less vocal or somebody who seems a little bit more reasonable, definitely have a conversation separate to their group. I find that also what's very disarming is being very nice and asking people, let's go for a coffee, just you and I, and talk about it. People are not expecting someone who they think is against them to, one, be pleasant, and two, to want to have a real sit-down, heart-to-heart discussion. And I think that if we can get people individually to sit down together and have those discussions, we'll definitely have a better impact than trying to argue in a scenario where they've already come with a mission to say this and do this and react to this.
I think that's very insightful. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add to that. I think anytime you can humanize the situation, like Tanya was saying, you'll have a better chance of connecting with someone. And I was listening to a podcast recently where there was this good quote that we need something along the lines of, we need to stop thinking that we can change things overnight. And the moment, if we subscribe to that mentality, thinking we're going to change things overnight, nothing will ever happen. So I think a lot of it has to do with meeting people where they are and just looking for little victories, depending on your relationship with them. If it's family, I think you could, have a better chance of humanizing it. If it's a person on the street or if it's someone online, it's just still planting that seed. So maybe the next person that says it to them, or the person after that, or the person after that, awakens something in them and brings them closer to change. I know it's not an easy way of doing things, but I think persistence does go a long way. And at the very least, maybe they'll just stop being as loud about the issues that they're advocating for, that you're trying to change.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add one more point to that. John just triggered my memory, is that also to remember that the person that you're speaking to is human. I think that we can often forget that the people that we're speaking to are actually human beings with thoughts, feelings, family, friends, etc. Because it becomes, I think, you versus them, and it becomes very combative. I think that it's also really important to have compassion and empathy, even when somebody disagrees with you, even when they disagree with you strongly, they disagree with you in a very ugly way. Because I feel that a lot of the times these people are going through a lot of miseducation, and if you can at least reach them, not necessarily by what you're talking about, but reach them as them remembering the decency that you showed them, they may come back to you at a later date. They may feel bad for how they behave just as a human being. I have seen, or I have had experience with people who have been very aggressive with me and then apologized after. And then we've been able to have a conversation from there because they realized that, you can feel very silly if you're screaming at somebody who's not screaming back at you. And that causes them to maybe they don't have the same values, but a lot of people do have some form of principle, and that will make them question, well, was that really the right way to react or to speak to somebody? And hopefully, if they have reason to think or rethink, I remember that you're a person that was able to engage them and would be happy to communicate with them in the future.
Thank you.
Just real briefly, Tanya, I think that was very insightful. I'm good at those things. They sound
It's hard.
they sound very familiar. Particularly, the academics over the years sounds incredibly familiar. I think the pandemic might have kind of hardened some of these relationships. People looking to find community, feel included. I think there's been an inflection point there. Thanks for that.
I think we have time for a question from the room and then from Zoom. So one more question from the room.
Did you mention my name?
No, I'm going to go with Darby first.
Okay.
Number one, thank you. Very insightful hearing your stories, and what strikes me is it's all local, at the community level. The other thing is, we're talking about trying to recognize others, but it does seem that some of the things, Paul, you did, putting normalcy back into the conversation so we can have reasonable conversations. And it can't just be sitting there being quiet. We need to take control of the forums by putting rules in place to allow for dialogue, because what I see happening is that dialogue's being shut down. And I think there are people that see that mechanism of yelling and screaming is very effective because they shut things down. So I really resonated, Paul, what you did, with your kind of putting rules in place for how the dialogue needs to happen. I think it takes control back of normal decorum in our town halls and our PTAs. It's really ridiculous to have screaming matches. So I really commend you for your courage and standing up there on the front lines and all of that. But I think it's a lesson for all of us. And I guess commenting on that, I think I've been stunned as a citizen, and I'm deciding I'm going to take back control to have reasonable dialogue, all views.
So I'm going to take that more as a comment. Versus a question. So just so we can move. Well, let's take the last question and then they can comment. So, Mayberry, I think you were there.
Yes, I had a comment and kind of a comment and follow-on question from Louise. Basically, time will do most of the work for these culture war issues because culture changes over time. Even among evangelicals, the younger evangelicals are accepting of LGBTQ community, whereas the older ones are less so. But, rather than try to change them, just wait for time and we'll do most of the work for you. But I do have a question. And if you push on a certain cultural issue when society is not ready for it, that can hurt you in public opinion and at the poll. And let me give you two examples. One is the role of trans athletes, men against women. And another related issue is the definition of who can get pregnant. Men can get pregnant? On the latter issue, for example, right now, there's a disagreement among Democrats who want to put the abortion issue in certain states on the ballot because that abortion vote would help them get people, especially women, out to the polls to vote for access to abortion. But they cannot agree on the definition of who can get pregnant. Some people don't want to use the word woman. And as a result, we are not taking advantage of that issue. And if you look at polls, I don't know where society is going to be 20 years from now. Maybe in 20 years from now, people will say, okay, men can get pregnant too. But as of now, this is extremely one-sided. It's something like 90%, think we should use the word woman when we talk about pregnancy. So if you push a certain issue too far when the society is not ready for it, my personal opinion is that it's going to hurt you. But I want to hear from Kyle or other speakers, where do you draw the boundary that, I'm not going to push it too far because society is not there yet?
Okay, we'll go first to Kylie.
Yeah, so that's actually something we've been doing a lot of public opinion research on. We've been doing research on the issue of trans girls in sports and how to talk about it. I think it's important to realize that public opinion isn't the end all be all. In the 50s, public opinion had some bad ideas. And they were against giving people civil rights. I personally think all trans people and youth should be able to live their lives how they want to. But I agree that society isn't necessarily on the same side as me. So I guess kind of what we tell people who live in swing districts and moderate areas is, it's an important issue and you want to vote to protect trans people. Don't necessarily campaign on the issue. It's not a super salient issue with voters. The economy is, healthcare, those sorts of issues. So don't necessarily campaign on it, but it's still really important to protect trans people when it comes to policy and to also normalize conversations around it. Because the more you talk about it, the more people understand. We're in such a different place than we were 10 years ago when it comes to marriage for same-sex couples. I've watched some of the focus groups, and people talking about it with each other, they start to kind of change their mind. We would start off talking about trans youth playing in sports, and a lot of people would be against it. And then you would kind of frame the issue as, well, what if this was your child and your child was a trans girl and she wanted to play on the girls' team? Like, what would you do? So I think, yeah, it does take time to change public opinion, but it's an important thing to do. And it's important to protect trans youth and trans people. But yeah, society isn't necessarily in the same place as me or the Democratic Party. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Kelly. Ron, that's a great question, and I actually know you. You probably don't me, but I know you from the internet. And I recognize you because you're a fighter of disinformation online. And I've seen you do it, and you do it well. And I think, the way you do that can, in my opinion, kind of provide a bit of an answer to this question. So what I've seen you do and what I do as well is you speak to the specifics, right? You get into the details, and you don't let the conversation devolve into a culture war, right? You call people out on facts, you provide your facts, and you stick to the facts. And you don't let it become political, don't let it be a culture war. And in this case, these are specific examples you gave. One thing specifics I would ask is like, what is the actual problem? What is the scope of the problem we're talking about? How many people does it affect? Right? And just really getting specifics. Another thing I would add is that you've probably heard the term the Overton window. I think it can be valuable to kind of push the conversation in society towards the direction that you want it to go, and hopefully pull the rest of voters with you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think this is a very difficult thing that both parties deal with in terms of what to put on their platform, what to advocate for. But independent of that, I think it's important that the work never stops. what a candidate or politician chooses to do. I think the circumstances that they're in, specifically in their race, will dictate that. But Kylie brought up how we're in a much different place than we were on, gay marriage 10 years ago. Barack Obama was not for gay marriage in 2008, but there were still people on the ground working to make that reality. And by the end of his presidency, he was in favor of it. It was, legalized essentially by the Supreme Court. And I think we just need to make sure that the work never stops. And like I was saying, it's the situation can dictate what a politician chooses to do based on their race that they're in.
Oh, okay. I am someone who strongly believes that what is right and what is wrong. And I don't feel that you should ever wait for society to be ready to fight for what is right. Society wasn't ready for Africans brought here and to America to be free. Society wasn't ready for Ruby Bridges to go to school. She was spat on when she was going to school. Society wasn't ready for interracial marriage. It wasn't ready for gay marriage. We can never allow those who are oppressed, regardless of the size of their group, no matter what size their group is, we can never allow any person who is being oppressed to wait for society to catch up for them to receive their liberation. And the reason why I say that is because Martin Luther King, though he's celebrated today, was not popular at his time. He was far from popular. But because of his actions and his works, he changed the way that society thinks. And although we may feel like it's not a win for us right now, although you may not win your political election or you may not win your candidacy, it is more important that you stay true to your message and you stay true to what is right, because the impact of that will ripple on into the future. And that is, for me, a much stronger and greater character than someone who's just making a decision based on getting elected.
And is that a way to end this program? Oh my God. Thank you, Tanya. Thank you, John. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Kay. Thank you, Kylie. It was great. I wasn't sure how we were all going to mesh, but you truly did. And the message is we have to do what is right. We have to make a difference. So thank you, everybody.